Thursday, dear brother. I
Oh
mean,
yeah, I thoroughly enjoyed it, and I encourage everybody to go and watch it because it's definitely enjoyable. It's a lot of information in there, a lot of meat. And so go watch it. Definitely go watch it.
it's definitely. It's 2 hours now, so that's actually so when he started
It's a
dropping
record for
it,
us.
he kept dropping it. You know what I'm saying? But it's something worth watching. You know what I'm saying, brother Joe? How you doing today, sir?
I'm doing well. It's raining cats and dogs outside, but I'm happy to be alive, as you would say. I'm excited
Amen.
about this conversation. I've been doing my reading, and I'm ready to get into it.
Amen. All right. What do you think about Pastor Gillison on Thursday?
I enjoyed it. I definitely enjoyed it. It's and honestly, I've heard people talk about Maya Angelou in the same way, and I had an opportunity to hear her speak once. But when you are around a certain caliber of elder, you just want to listen.
Amen.
Right? You just want to listen and soak up as much wisdom and life experience as you can while you can. And I think all of us who were in the room that day were able to enjoy and just soak that up. And so it was a pleasure.
Yeah, no question about it. Especially one who has done the work. This ain't somebody that's doing a whole bunch of talking. He's over there. He took an empty piece of land over on Delavan, 701 East Delavan. There was a garbage dump, and he turned it into that facility, that beautiful facility, largest new build black church in the city of Buffalo. You know what I'm saying? Built from the ground. You know what I'm saying? And it's a church. It's a banquet facility, studio. I mean, when you go in that thing, it's just amazing. So it was an honor having him. And we had with him Nia Badger. And Sister Nia was really dropping it like it was hot. I'm talking about Sister Nia was literally, Sister Nia Badger is a teacher. She's a business owner, Styles business owner. She's a minister in the ministry of music at Bethesda. I mean, when you talk about, and she's a parent leader in this community. This We the Parent Show really, we have been bringing you, quality information. Last week we had an awesome Tamisha Walker, and she was a great article in the Buffalo News. If you have not seen the article, this Thursday's Buffalo News. Was it this Thursday's Buffalo News?
Yeah.
Yeah, this Thursday Buffalo News. Rob Watson did an awesome article on Sister Tamisha. As a matter of fact, we're hoping to have her and who next Thursday, this coming Thursday.
We have Bria Cooper, who is a representative from the Inner High Council, coming on this Thursday, along with Dr. Mark Abraham, to have kind of this student roundtable talk about our education system. Dr. Mark Abraham, who was a principal, who just released a book. Go get the book. This is what success looks like. So Thursday is going to be really good.
Yes, and so this intergenerational conversation is what we're talking about. I mean, so we talked about having the elders like Pastor Gillison. We talked about having the youth. So that's really what the conversation and is about. Ross Joe will call me this morning and talk about more fire in this intergenerational conversation. So we go be with the more fire. But everybody, you know what we're talking about today. If you pay attention to our Facebook page, we've been advertising it. We talking about what you talking about. You know what I'm saying? Everybody in the city of Buffalo right now is talking about this mayor's race. You know what I'm saying? One way or the other, everybody is talking about it, right? Now, we're going to give it an educational spin. You know what I'm saying? So before we give it our educational spin, we're going to give you an opportunity to weigh in the conversation. What we want to know is this mayor's race that's happening, this competitive mayor's race, this is the first competitive general election mayor's race we've had in Buffalo since 1977. And for those people who don't know that history, that was Arthur O. Eve versus Jimmy Griffin. Arthur O. Eve had ran and won the Democratic primary. The white vote had got split between Les Fascio and Jimmy Griffin, and Art Eve won the Democratic primary. And in this town, generally when you win the Democratic primary, you the mayor. But Jimmy Griffin decided to run on a conservative line, and he came, and we had a competitive race. Matter of fact, what's the statistics? What was the numbers compared?
Yeah, I'm pulling it up, but I know that from the article I read in the Buffalo News, that was the last time we had a 60% voter turnout for that election.
One of the highest turnouts for the mayoral race. Right, so generally we have a 25-30% people who show up to vote in the mayor's race. In that race, the last competitive race, we had double that. So what I can anticipate, you know what I'm saying, in this race is that we're about to see, a large turnout. Hopefully we'll see a large turnout, larger than the primary and larger than typical mayor's races, because typically there's not a mayor's race in November. So typically the mayor race is in, now June, used to be September, in the primary. So the question is this good for Buffalo? Emmanuel, Joe, anybody want to call in and weigh in the conversation? 837-1112, 837-1112. Is a competitive mayor's race in November good for the city of Buffalo?
So I say definitively and absolutely yes. and here's why I take that position. What you just talked about that happened in the 70s and what we hope is happening here is a higher level of interest and by extension a higher level of participation in democracy as a result of two candidates who are coming out who are vying for the support of the masses. What we've seen in the last couple of decades with regards to turnout is 15, 20, 25%. You don't want to have 25% of the people deciding who's ultimately going to guide the ship for the next 4 years. You want a high level of turnout. You want everybody weighing in from the north side and the south side and the east side and the west side, giving their opinion, expressing their interest, showing their support or dissatisfaction with what's going on, and taking that input to the ballot. And here's a year where a bunch of things have happened that were unexpected that is raising that level of excitement. And so I say anytime you have a democracy that has something going on that's encouraging a higher level of participation, it is a good thing for the city it's happening in. In this case, it's Buffalo, New York.
All right. I mean, what's your thoughts? Good for the
Yeah,
city?
I think it's great actually. My opinion on it is something you said earlier. Usually when ROE won in 1977, that it was still an assumption that winning the primary meant you won the election. And so for me, from my generation's perspective, I think we need to adamantly fight against that. A primary should be used for what it is, a primary. Primaries are used to dictate the candidate that the parties endorse that they want to run in November. It should not mean that winning in June means you win in November. And so I think anytime we have an opportunity to go out and vote in the masses for people in November, we have to take advantage of it, because what we've seen over the years is that the Democratic Party runs hard up until June, they win the primary, and then they just cakewalk to November. And I think that's unfair. I don't think that's real democracy. I think we've basically just been under Democratic control, just doing it. Like there's no pushback to that. And so I like the fact that we have a write-in candidate, we have a Democratic candidate, and we get to actually go in there and make a choice. And it don't feel like we just go in there and fill in the blank dot because the Democratic line won. So I think it's great. I think we should encourage it, and I think we need to do it more.
If I can add, and I wholeheartedly agree completely with your assessment. But one other thing, and of course this is an educational show, one thing that we see happening as a result of the increase in level of excitement is an increase in the educated electorate. We see them reading these articles. We see Buffalo News putting out stuff. We see Investigative Post putting out stuff. We see Challenger. We see Criterion. People are absorbing and learning these new techniques, such as the potential for a write-in campaign, which is a new concept, I would argue, in Buffalo, New York. And so the electorate is learning a deeper and more substantive level of what democracy looks like, and that can't be bad for Buffalo.
Well, you named a lot of media outlets, but to me, the main one you didn't name, the social media. The fact that this is a trending conversation in social media, because our young people, your generation and below, y'all get your information from social media. And the fact that in social media we're talking about politics. And now, it's interesting because at the same time, the social media seems like it's trying to kind of tamp down the voice of politics in social media. You know what I'm saying? And I don't want to take the show on this direction, but I think this is an interesting point because so many people are getting involved. Look at what happened in this last two presidential elections. The last two presidential elections, first of all, you have a similar situation that took place in Buffalo that took place when Trump won the Republican nomination. People thought Trump had no chance of winning. People thought India had no chance of winning. Then we see him win the popular, he didn't win the popular vote, let me be real clear. He won the election in 2016, but the point is, people gave him no chance. Then, so the party lines, what people thought was going to happen according to party lines didn't happen. Then we'll go look at the 2020 election. We have record national turnout. The big driver in both of those elections is social media. We watched The Great Hat. We talked about that. Do you think social media is going to influence this election?
I just want to make this point because I'm doing my research. The last mayoral election, which was 2017, I believe, that's what I'm looking at.
Right, 2017.
15% turnout. For the election, the November election, there was 15% turnout.
Yeah, but let's be real about that. You know what I'm saying? There was no election. There was no competition on the ballot. You know what I'm saying? So the last election was a Democratic primary. You know what I'm saying? And I think that was who ran against it? Was that Bernie Tolbert ran against the mayor in 2017?
In the election, he ran against Mark Schroeder.
Schroeder and
Right.
Betty Jean Grant, I believe.
Yeah,
Oh, yeah, that's right.
Sister Betty, yeah.
Right.
Well, 15% turnout. I just want to make that point.
So here's the dissonance when you hear that, right? So you get 15%, but you also frequently get people saying, I had no idea there was a primary. So if we were to look at the primary numbers, they would probably be horrifically low as well, right? So it's not just saying that people knew from the primaries that the election was already determined come November. They most likely said, we had no idea that there were primaries, and we still didn't come out in November. And so, again, you get 15-20% of the electorate that ultimately decides the mayoral race, and that's awful.
Yeah, and just to go back to the social media piece, I like that social media is engaging with this, but I just want to caution everybody to understand that everything you see on social media is not always true. You must check your sources when you get things on social media, because a lot of times people are sharing things, people are spreading things that not always true, but just make pop. And so, although you're getting information from social media, please back up that information. Go to the source. Make sure you know who's putting out the information, because what we've seen after the primary was we did a show, and a lot of people said we didn't have real information because we were getting all our information on social media, so we needed real information. So, although social media is a tool and an asset, make sure you are sourcing your information, because there are a lot of false things put on social media that is not always true, and you got to make sure you source that.
And it's interesting hearing your generation say that. You know what I'm saying? Because in a lot of ways, I mean, I'm not on social media enough to understand how much information is out there, right? You know, from the social media source, right? And so I really don't know what is out there. I mean, is the information out there just that bad? I mean, that you need to say that? I mean, or is it just, you know, it's slanted by people giving their spin to it?
Well, I would say the perfect example to look at would be how COVID has been, covered on social media, right? So you get very diverging messages with regard to certain things on social media, and again, you take it at face value, right? Exactly. You see the soundbite. Often, this isn't necessarily an article, a substantive article that someone has written. This is a 2-minute soundbite, a 30-second soundbite that says something, and you just assume, again, you're seeing it, therefore it's true. But you have to understand what you see, not to suggest that everything you see on the news is real, but what you see from an actual established news outlet is not the same thing. Anybody can put a post up on Facebook, on Instagram.
Yeah, and at least from my point of view, the thing that rung for me was the day after the primary. And although historically it's been true, people were saying we have a new mayor. And for me, although it's historically been true, she still has to win in November. And so for me, that's false information, where people are declaring somebody a winner of the election, not just the primary. So again, it's little nuanced information like that, where something may have a sliver of truth in it, but everything around it isn't actually factual. So those are the things you see on social media, where, like Joel said, it'll be a 2-minute clip on there, but if you watch the whole video, you'll get the truth. But in a 2-minute clip, it's a sliver of information that you take and run with, and then you out here talking about it, but that's not the whole truth.
And
so,
go ahead. It's interesting because that actually is worst case scenario for her. Because if you go back to the 77 example, people assumed that because the Democratic nominee had always won, you know what I'm saying, that's just the way it was, that Arthur Eve had won he had a larger turnout from our community the primary than he did the November election, because people assumed that when you win the Democratic primary, you win. And so if people assume that India's already been elected the mayor, you know what I'm saying, that's less people that show up in the election. Now that's an interesting point, because you can't imagine too much less. It's only 20-something% that showed up, so you can't imagine it being much lower than that. But at this point, what do y'all expect? Y'all expect a large turnout in November, or are you expecting it to be still? Do you expect it to get to the levels of the Griffin, the 68%?
No.
Absolutely.
Really?
No. Absolutely
No.
No.
I mean, you would have, numbers-wise, you would have to have a 200% increase in turnout between June and November. Now, I know more people are going to be excited, but let's just look at the basis as a general proposition, right? A lot of the mayor's base are consistent voters. They're prime voters, right? Mm-hmm. They're going to vote anyway, right? And we see those numbers probably somewhere around 10, 12, 1,000 individuals. And then India's voters are not necessarily prime voters, though some may be, But what they are is extremely motivated and have been for, 3-4 years. This is that progressive movement, right?
Yeah.
So they've been in an excited state. They're also going to come out, right? That's this new group that's exercising their democratic rights on a consistent level. And so that factors in two groups. You've got the progressive movement on the one side, and you've got the consistent prime voters on the other side. My question, if you're going to argue that we're going to get from 20 to 60, is where are the other individuals coming from? Where is that other, 40% to get to the 70s level? What group does that represent? And why have they been so quiet thus far?
Well, it's interesting because obviously people will make the argument that in the primary, the mayor didn't run a campaign. Mm-hmm. He didn't debate. You know what I'm saying? He didn't run like no other race before, and so a lot of people just didn't know it was an election going on. So some of those people didn't show up, right? But what I would suggest something that it's interesting that you use the idea that the progressive movement is really where India's base is coming from. Where the turnout is coming from. I remember, I don't know if y'all remember this. Y'all remember the Antoine Thompson race, and I think it was 2010, 11. You know what I'm saying? You remember the Antoine Thompson race against Crisanti? Yeah, I mean, I forgot what the difference between the Republican enrollment and the Democratic enrollment, but it was like some ridiculous number, like 100 to 1. I mean,
it's still that way.
Right. There's no chance Republican have a win in a general election. You know what I'm saying? But Antoine, came and he was leading that progressive movement effort. Matter of fact, he was one of the leaders on the vote on same-sex marriage. You know what I'm saying? And people thought it was no way that Antoine could lose in the general election, right? But because there was a base of people that came out of the church that was not supportive of the same-sex marriage law at that particular time, that you saw a Democrat lose to a Republican in a general election, and you saw a turnout based on the church base really, turned it up and came out like they had not come out up until that point.
Ironically, didn't he ultimately vote for that in the Senate?
Yeah. And listen. Ironically, and got a
judgeship out of it.
Okay, wait. I thought we on the radio. I ain't gonna go into that, right? But yes. But the point I'm making is that it was a clear communication that. And why is this an important conversation to have right now? This is a conversation for those who've been paying attention to the New York City mayoral race. Eric Adams is making this point right now. Eric Adams is making a point that the progressive wing of the Democratic Party, which you're saying is really India's base, I'm saying, is the loudest part of the party. The whole Bernie Sanders group is the loudest part of the party. But he's saying that that's not where the masses of people in the party are at. The masses of people in the party do not support that far left-wing agenda. The masses of people are in the center. You know what I'm saying? They kind of where he at, which is the reason why he beat Maya Wiley and Garcia, and the AOC didn't support him. He said that whole AOC wing, AOC was one of the first people to call India when she got elected. That wing of the party is loud, but he's saying that's not where the masses of people are at. So do you think that's going to play itself out in Buffalo? That right now India got the progressive wing, the progressive support and a small turnout. But if you get a large turnout, you're going to see something different.
Yeah, I just want, again, I'm going to be here giving context all day. That's just what I'm going to be doing. So in the last mayoral race in 2017, we said 15%. There were 43,000 votes. Mm-hmm. That was the voter turnout for the next mayoral race. So if we're saying it's going to be more, are you asking, is we going to see 50,000? Is we going to see 60,000? What are we saying? Because if
I'm saying double that.
You think we're going to see almost 80,000?
I'm saying that this race, I'm arguing that this race is good for Buffalo. I'm arguing that this race is going to bring out the progressives in our city, which is going to be loud, and they got money now from the national level.
But it's
also going to wake up a sleeping giant.
Yeah. But this is my perspective, and this is what I have seen over the last couple of years, being somebody who's taking part in voting. There's a difference between social media support and actual support in the polls, mm-hmm. right? And so we have to differentiate the two. So people are loud on social media and sharing and adamant about it. But what happens a lot of times, and if you look at the midterm elections in Buffalo, people suffer from this. They got huge amounts of support from social media, They got to election day and nobody showed up. Because although people have a voice in it, they don't always go use their voice when it comes to voting.
No, those people with the social media support didn't show up.
Yeah, exactly.
Those prime voters showed up.
Exactly.
And so what I'm saying is a whole group of prime voters, and there's a whole group of, voters who typically vote, that vote in primaries generally, that's going to show up in this general election that we didn't see in the primary.
I will be shocked.
Well, I think that
We know you. We got 2 calls on the line. We be with you 1 second, caller. Don't go nowhere.
there's some prime voters that are going to come, but you also have to have the prime voter come and exercise the ability to do the write-in. There's a 2-step process here.
Right.
This is very
And
important.
that's where it potentially becomes an impediment to success for the mayor. And we'll have to see. I've got some solid numbers, but I know we got some callers. So
Oh no, okay. So let's go. We're gonna come back to the solid numbers because I think that's where we want to be at in this conversation with the solid numbers. Caller, you there?
Yes. Good morning, Brother Sam. This
Good
is Miss
morning,
Doyle.
Mother Dr. Doyle, and congratulations! I saw all the wonderful accolades from the library auditorium being named after you. Congratulations, is well deserved.
Thank you so much, Brother Sam. If you get a chance, gentlemen, to go to the Meriwether Library and see the sign, it's absolutely beautiful. And I just want to thank Senator Tim Kennedy for having the vision to name the auditorium after me. I want to thank Mayor Brown and all the officials. We had over 100 people there, Brother Sam, for the ribbon cutting. And I do want to thank WAFO CEO Sheila Brown. She gave me a very special gift, and I want to thank her for that. But it was noted, Brother Sam, that I didn't realize this because I was just doing the work, that I've done more than 100 programs in that auditorium over the years.
Wow. I'm not surprised though, Mother.
But I just quickly want to comment on your topic. I think regarding the race for mayor, competition to me is always good in every situation.
Amen. That's
because it creates interest. It provides an opportunity for people to really take things seriously. And I want to note that the mayor was the keynote speaker at the ribbon cutting, but India Walton also came.
All right.
And you know what? I want to say this. I don't believe it was political. I truly believe that she came out of respect for the event and out of the respect for the work that was done in that auditorium, because I spent half of my life in that auditorium. So I just wanted to make that comment because a lot of times everything is not political.
That's right.
So thank you, Brother Sam. I hope you get a chance, gentlemen, to go and see the sign because it's a beautiful sign.
Yes, we
Have
will.
a good day.
congratulations, Dr. Doyle.
And that respect
Thank
was
you.
that respect was well deserved, and I think it's healthy for 2 political candidates to show up at an event. I don't think we should. Everything got to be that both sides want to be heard, and it's healthy to have a conversation where both sides get to say their view of what's going on, and it don't have to be adversarial.
That's democracy.
This is we having a public conversation about what their vision is for the future, and then we decide what vision we want to go with, and then hopefully the person who lost get with that vision, because this is the vision for the whole city of Buffalo. This is not us against them. This is all about all of us together. So that's great to hear that they both were there. Next caller, you're on the line.
Yeah, thank you for saying that politics is not us against them, because too often that's how it's played out. You're told to pick sides, and the other side becomes the enemy and their supporters, and that's a dangerous thing. I think this is a teachable moment. I think it's also good for Buffalo, this whole election process, and people have to have their learning hats on and be ready to learn some of the lessons that are about to be taught here in the city. I hope it doesn't get real personal and real dirty. I hope it still sticks to the issues. But I want us to be careful, too, about the language you used. You used a language in your sentence a few minutes ago saying far left and progressive, that's the same thing. There's a difference between a far left extreme and someone who's progressive about making progressive progress in issues and in things and the conditions of our community. I think this is really going to be primarily a decision about development. Right now, development in this city has been led by developers who already have money, and money that they have will be given in addition to that by monies that have been earmarked by the poverty in the city. The city gets block grant funds, and instead of putting those block grant funds to alleviating poverty, it seems to me they've done just the opposite. They've increased the poverty and have given the block grant monies to the people who are so-called developers in the city, who are changing the dynamics of the city. And one of the points that looks clear to me, is that the current mayor always brags about the tax rate not having increased. But down on the ground, the rents have increased 100, maybe more percent. And that's what some people call progress, but some people call hardship. So I think people need to have their ears and eyes open, because this is a choice on how we want this city developed. Do we want rents to go up another 100%, while we keep tax rates low? Or are we going to give money to the actual development of our poorer communities, or give it to the developers who already got the money already? So I'm going to hang up and listen. I could probably said too much already. Have a good day.
Definitely not saying too much. We appreciate your comments, listener, and this is what this is about. This is really about getting this conversation out public about what the issues that our people are concerned about. You know what I'm saying? I remember a couple years ago when Mother Eva Dore was running for lieutenant governor, it was a guy running for governor, and it was from the rent is too damn high party. That was the name of his political party.
By far my favorite candidate of all time. That guy was amazing.
Because those are issues that people want to talk about. And I don't think there's anything wrong with us talking about people that want to talk about. But I do appreciate you saying, let's keep it positive and above board. I saw a video, a photo being circulated in social media where one of the handlers for India had on a shirt with a picture of Mayor Brown on it, had loser on the bottom. I think that's not healthy. You know what I'm saying? When you start, having white people in particular walking around with these shirts with a black man on there talking about loser, that imagery, it triggers the wrong thing in people. You know what I'm saying? So I think to the extent that we talking about issues, we good, right? The minute you try to get us against them, black against white, poor against rich, and we get into that and we need to fight each other as opposed to just talk about the vision for the city. Yeah. What you want to happen, I think that's a healthier path to be on.
Yeah, and I think we've seen this play out on a national level when this year we seen Trump in the debates. Trump had an inability to talk about issues. Everything from Trump was an attack on the person or attack on what the person was doing, and we have been used to just debating issues. And we're saying on here, we want to get back to that. We don't want to get into the personal throwing jabs at each other. At the end of the day, we want issues. Present to us issues on how you want to see the city move forward, and let us decide. But again, this is the dangers of social media. Because social media doesn't usually run with the issues. They run with the name calling and the picture throwing and all that. They run with that stuff. And so this is the danger of getting information just from social media, because a lot of times social media doesn't do a good job of putting up the issues, but they do a good job of putting up the stuff that we don't need to be talking about. And you got to make sure you pay attention to that, especially during an important campaign like this.
Yeah, when we start talking about, I heard you refer to it earlier, Joe, the importance of having an educated electorate. See, the educated electorate needs quality information.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? If you're not going to have an educated electorate if we just talk about each other. We don't talk about issues, what we're going to do, how we're going to make it better. We're not going to help ourselves. We're not going to help our city. It's good for our city. This competition is good for our city if we are if we end up with a more informed electorate about issues that impact us as a whole. Obviously, one of those issues for us is education. It's a priority issue. So we looking forward to finding out what these candidates' position on education is. Up until now, and let me just, before I jump to the education, let me just say this about what is y'all perspective on why we have a low voter turnout typically? Because y'all not optimistic that we're going to have a larger turnout, right? You know what I'm saying? So what is because from my perspective, I think the party line vote is part of the reason why we have a low turnout. I mean, in this particular case, when you look at the sheriff's race, you look at the mayor's race, both the endorsed Democrats in the primary lost. You know what I'm saying? So this whole party line thing, I think, is shaking. I think obviously on a national level, Donald Trump shook the party line on the Republican side. I think the new generation, y'all generation, I think we're getting past this party line vote. I think parties benefit from keeping low turnout because you get your core people who are voting determining elections, and you don't have masses of people who they're feeling maybe uninformed, deciding elections. Now we are in a different situation. I think the more people you make educated in this process, the better outcome you get. What's your thoughts on that?
So I have two thoughts. The first is a practical example of a violation of the laws of physics. We always talk about this notion that every action has an equal but opposite reaction, right? And so a certain element of the electorate is saying, I don't vote because I take an action, but I see no change after that action, right? I've consistently taken my step forward, but then nothing. So why do I want to take another step forward when I don't expect anything different to happen? So you have that mentality amongst a certain group. You mix that you mix that with another group potentially that's just saying, I'm disinterested in this. You're asking me to do something within the system, and I'm telling you that from day one, as I came up through this Buffalo education system, etc., the system has never seemed to do much for me. Right. Why am I engaging in a system that seems to be routed against me, systemically designed against me at every turn? I'm not going to spend even if it's just 10 minutes to vote, I'm not going to spend my time exercising this vote for a system that continuously works against me.
That just sounds so irrational to me, but I feel you. I feel you that that's where people are at, but that's just crazy.
Yeah. So from my perspective, I think we have to just take into consideration where we're at, right? Buffalo's the third poorest city in America, and we have a 30% adult literacy rate, right? So what that means is that 70% of the adults walking around Buffalo have to work jobs in which it doesn't require a high school diploma or above. Like, they have to work these low jobs, right? So what that generally means is they have to focus on having income to survive. And so now what you're telling somebody who has, one, been failed by the education system, but two, now has to work so much just to stay above water, hey, take 10 minutes out your day to go vote. Hey, take some time to go hear about the issues. It's hard for them to make the switch, because the difference between that 10 minutes of voting and the 10 minutes of me going to work may be food in my mouth, or my bill being my rent not being paid, or my lights being cut off. And so, although that's not okay from my perspective, I think we first have to deal with the fact that is the reality of 70% of the adults walking around Buffalo, where the difference between 10 minutes for them is the difference between survival. And that's just the reality.
Well, first of all, golly, that was really well stated. It was their problem to say with your dad when you say something like that. That's a good, I really appreciate that analysis, right? But on some level, that's changing too. You know what I'm saying? We saw on the 15th, we see that the child poverty in Buffalo is the second highest in this country. But, we're going to see a significant change in that. Everybody who got a child, the child tax credit is in Buffalo now. We got a large percentage of people who are going to benefit from that. They're going to get into their account, $250 for every child over 6 years old, $300 for every child under 6 years old in their account every month for the next year, and then get the balance of what their child tax credit in their filing for the next year. So we're going to see the incomes of people go up, and it's going to be interesting how it plays itself out. So, but your point is well taken. Let me just say this: the other part. I know we got two callers on the line. We're finna come to you right now. Is that to the point you made, Joe? That we saw the largest turnout in the history of America in this last general election, right?
We did.
And we saw the reaction to that be voter suppression laws like we have never seen. When you look at what's going on in Texas, when you look at what's going on across
Georgia,
this country, people are trying to stop people from participating in the election. The suppression is real. You know what I'm saying? So, caller, we got two calls on the line. We'll come back to Joel after that. Caller, you on the line?
Yes, good morning.
Good morning.
Another great show, another great subject. First, I want to congratulate Sister Eva Doyle on her them naming the library after her, the auditorium. I really want, because she put some good work in there. When I think about the subject that you're talking about, I look at, for instance, I would really like for you, Sam, to maybe explain, some of the people that were standing behind India. When I look at the two pictures, when I look at her and the people behind her, and then I look at, Mayor Brown, and I look at the people behind them, I see two different dynamics. When I look at that picture, maybe somebody needs to look at that closely and see who's following who. When we looked at the Black Lives Matter, for instance, protests, I know there were certain women that came up with the program and what they call Black Lives Matter. What ended up is other people's agendas started to be pushed, and not the lives of black men that are being killed every day by police, for instance. Other things, we got the Asians, they came up with laws for them. You got the gays, they come up with a whole month for them. I mean, everybody else's issue, even though it starts off with us, you see what I'm saying, turns to somebody. So when I look at the dynamics of this race, which is very educational, you give them a lot of information, I look at who's standing behind those people, also. When I look at Brown who's standing behind him, and I look at India who's standing behind him. And people should look very, very closely at that picture. I mean, it's very simple, and that's going to tell you, what your future Buffalo look like. And don't slip. Some of the older voters that may not have came out, that may have thought one way, when they look at that picture and they start thinking, they may see something different. So don't, really, 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 analyze that. And I think you will come out to the conclusion of who's going to win this race. I'm sorry to say, but it's very simple. And thank you guys, and I hope you understood what I say. And have a great day.
All right.
And if I get on, caller, thank you so much for calling. I just want to caution folk in this respect. Don't just look at the picture. Look at the message behind the picture. We need to know not just visually what we're seeing, but what's being said. And I say that to say, and I shared some articles this morning, there seems to be a disconnect. It is an odd bedfellows kind of deal with regard to looking at those pictures and seeing what you see, but then looking at the messages from the two groups, which you would expect to actually be, I'm trying to figure out how to say this, you would expect the other group to be saying what the other group is saying.
I think this is important, and I thank you for saying that, Joe, because what I read in those articles was this is the importance of critically thinking, right? Because what happens is they put a picture in front of you, and they expect you to just make assumptions based on the picture in front of you. But when you read these articles and you critically think about it, you say, something ain't adding up here. The picture don't match what's really happening. So again, educated electorate does this. You critically think about every piece of information that's put in front of you. Don't just take things for face value, because of social media, people assume you're going to take things for face value, and they run on that. But let's hold our candidates to a higher standard. Let's just hold them to a higher standard.
But you also got to be able to read the
that's
article.
right.
You know what I'm saying? I mean, that's important, right? And because
fact.
people take advantage of advertising of the fact that if you can't read, they give you a picture of what they want you to see, and you act based on the picture. I mean, it's amazing to me when you watch these commercials where they talking about the side effects of some of these drugs is that you can die, you know what I'm saying? But they got a person sitting there all happy and everything is wonderful.
And they say it real low. Side effects make you lose death.
Right. You know what I'm saying? So the picture is what people sell it, right? Because people, and we just talked about just what's going on in this country in terms of people's capacity to read, which leads to one of the issues that we got to keep at the forefront of this conversation, which has to do with education. Lee said something interesting to me this morning. We talk about teaching our kids critical race theory before we talk about teaching kids how to read. You know what I'm saying? If kids can't read, you know what I'm saying, what difference do it make those other things? We have to get to the conversation of our kids being able to read, write, and do math on grade level, graduate college and career ready, before we get over-invested into this conversation on anything else.
And I think Pastor Gillison drove that point home the other day, where you say we've got a disconnect here. We've got an order of operations issue here. Yeah. We've got to take step one before we can get to step 5.
No question about it. All right, 2 calls on the line. We sorry, we got caller. You on air?
Yes, beautiful family. More fire, and I hope it's burning and blazing continually, not just a little spark.
Amen. Ross.
Well, I'd like to welcome everybody to the institution of WFO. If you've been listening this morning, whether you skipped the last 10, 15, or 30 years of school, you might have been caught up today. And I think that for the last couple of years, we've been talking about intergenerational activity. We've been talking about the whole need for our community to understand civics. And because we don't understand civics, that's why this conversation today is going on so long. We don't understand civics because we haven't been properly educated in the systems that have been in our schools. And if we don't have any saving institutions like elders or somebody who really love us, not just people who might say things or take a picture, but for people who love us, if we don't have a reference point, then social media might be all that the lost generation will cling to. The institution of WFO, though, have leaders and elders who have battled, fought, and been persecuted, and they're still standing on loving black people. Minister Abdul Alim Muhammad was interviewed on one of our shows, and the first question I asked him before he talked is, do you love black people? Because if you don't know where people's reference points is, they can say anything that they want. We're now going to have reference points. That's why we need intergenerational conversations. We got to have a reference point beyond what they said. Well, what did they do 30 years ago? What did they do 100 years ago?
Amen.
Why do we need that information? You only can get that from your elders and the people who love you. Moses' generation meant well, but they didn't make it to the promised land.
Uh-oh.
The generation before Martin Luther King really meant well, but they didn't want them out in the street. We have to make sure that the intergenerational conversation keeps the wisdom and the logic, and anything that's going to grow up in the spring and summer is what was planted in the harvest or in the sowing season. So anything that we don't like that's coming up, it's because we didn't cultivate it, or we let somebody else cultivate something in our garden. And if it grows, that means we wasn't on point.
Hey, Ross, that's so wonderfully stated. And one of the things I appreciate about what you're saying is I know that, everything that we're doing on, and even what you're doing, I remember the work that we did back in ECC right when the elders pulled us up and they took us under their wing, is grounded in guidance from elders. And that's really why we've had this as an intergenerational show, because we understand, because people took responsibility for passing that institutional knowledge to us, we want to make sure we're passing it to the next generation. So we appreciate your work that you continue to do with Access to Africa and all the things you're doing in this community, and the continued work of the We Parents.
Yeah, so I just want to add. I just want to add to that basically, from my perspective, what I see is that we are up here talking about having a more educated electorate, but that has to start somewhere, right? And so what it feels like is that they don't want us to have an educated electorate because they don't teach us it in high school, right? So it has to start at a foundation where in high school you should be getting the basics. This is how we vote. This is our voting system. This is who represents you. Just building a foundation of ethics so when this child leaves, they don't have to start over. But what we see happening, especially here in Buffalo, because that's what we could talk about, is children leave not being able to read, write, and do math on grade level, not being college and career ready, and having no idea how civics work. And that's a problem when it comes to elections like this, where we're saying we need a more educated electorate, but we're failing at educating them in the places where we need to educate them at.
Which is the critical reason why we giving student voice. I mean, we had Tamisha on last week. We're going to have Bree on this coming week. We're going to continue to make sure that we're taking some responsibility. We ain't just talking about it as a problem.
Right.
We're going to take some responsibility, and we're going to make sure we engage in these young people to be informed about what's going on so they can build on the foundation we land. You want to say, Joe?
I want to throw some numbers in here.
Okay.
And I throw the numbers in because some of our listeners may not necessarily encounter these or may not have another source by which they're going to receive these. So what's been going on since the primaries, all right? So there are reporting requirements, guys, if you didn't know. All of these campaigns have to report money, where it's coming from, where it's flowing. And we always have this. You hear this in every analysis. Follow the money to understand what's fueling the engine in essence, right?
Amen.
So I'm taking these numbers from the Buffalo News. Understand that the Buffalo News has its own bias like any outlet. So I say this looking through that lens, but still saying the numbers are what the numbers are.
Right.
All right? So since in the last 33 days since the primary, Brown raised $193,000. Well, actually, he needs to report. He actually needs to file his financial disclosure, but his people are saying when they file it, he raised $193,000. India raised $199,000 in that same time period. So in the last 33 days, she's actually slightly outraised him. Here's what the war chest looks like right now. Walton has $147,000 in her war chest to spend, right? Brown has $200,000 in his war chest to spend. So they're not too far off. Brown has a little bit more money, but it's very interesting because, again, you have an incumbent of 16 years who's developed a war chest versus an individual who's just running this year. But let's look at where their donations are actually coming from, right? So the average donation for Walton is $56.40, all right? Now, she's received thousands of small donations, including unitemized ones, which are donations of $99 or less, right? Now, she has, as you all have heard, she has received some money from outside of the city and the region. She certainly has, but as the article indicates, and we can share the article, that the bulk of her money is coming from the Western New York and specifically Buffalo area. Now, Brown, on the other hand, when they did an analysis of his, they said, and I'm quoting here because I don't want to get in trouble. I'm just quoting what the article says. Brown's campaign is heavily bankrolled by a who's who of business, lobbying, union, and political interests. He's attracted large donations from companies, some with businesses before the city, with money flowing from real estate developers, construction executives, the Seneca Nation of Indians, a pest control firm, a janitorial firm, engineering companies, healthcare interests, and others. Now, I want to leave that out there for the listener. I'm not asking you to draw conclusions. I want to give you the information. That's what the article says. That's what the information is sharing. You take that critical analysis that you have and come to your conclusions. But this goes back to what I said earlier, which is don't just look at the picture. The picture could be deceiving. Look at how the money is flowing. Look at the sources of the money. Look at what the messages are, and then draw your conclusion.
Right. All right. So we got another call on the line. Caller, you there?
Yes, I needed to tell you, like two experts, as first two towns of two cities, when in Illinois and one in South. How are you, gentlemen? Happy Holy Saturday today. I'd like to say, I lived as far as picking every kind of vegetable and every type of situation in the fields of rich black people who treated us very well. And they had everything in the South, all of the South. We worked, and I tell anybody, it is the problem here in the city of Buffalo. When I came here as a child in the 60s, there were makers and shakers here, men and women, like Mrs. Evil, Mrs. Evil Doll. It was makers and shakers who were women going back to school, getting degrees, and they were in their 40s and 50s and 60s. And it was men doing the thing. This city could have been another Atlanta.
Wow.
It was on its way with these old-timers who were the financiers, and they stole the number business from us. That gave us jobs. As you hit, you didn't have to worry about getting your money. And they were buying houses. They wouldn't loan us a penny. None of the banks. All of them were prejudiced. And if you got a loan, you paid 14% from a unscrupulous owner of the property. And nobody could hardly buy property. They started Scorpius, which I was a member of. And we had a bunch of people that put up money for mortgages. When they saw the financiers helping us, they started loading us money. Now, when I get to this point, I want to say, it's a woman named Mrs. Emma Montgomery. She lived on Hill Street. She was kidnapped, and she's been killed. The police has done nothing for her. She was a great church warrior as well as the city of Buffalo. It is something that is inherently wrong when they take and help the white people when they got killed, and they ain't done nothing for her. Now, as far as it's our fault, because we should hold these here worthless detectives and policemen. They should be living in the city. If you don't, you get your money where you spend your taxes. You should not have a job in the city of Buffalo. That's the first problem. I'm going to tell you a story, and I'm going to get off. I was taking calculus when I was only 16 years old. I was taking chemistry, biology, and all these subjects. I was skipped 2 grades, working on the farm. My parents worked like animals to give me an education to my family. There is something inherently wrong when women stay drunk all the time. Don't try to go back to school to get an education. Having children out of wedlock. That was the worst thing you could do in the South. They would send their girls anywhere, northwest, east, when they got pregnant, and the mother would wear a pillow. They think it's something cute to say that they got children by a baby father. You are going back into slavery. That's what the white man did to us when they brought us over here. We didn't know who was the father. And you go on our shows like that terrible man who have you come up there and act the idiot and imbecile. And this is where you got to stop the buck. When the black Muslim were here, they made women special. And they made men stop cursing around women. You hear women cursing and saying things that they ought to be put in jail for in front of their children.
Mother Pastor.
I was at school there, sir. Y'all have a good day.
Thank you so much, Mother Pasco. And first of all, we appreciate this history lesson you give us every week. And I think one of the issues that you're raising that we got to have is this conversation about residency requirement. I think that's a really, really important, conversation that needs to be in this mayor's race. Where the both of these candidates at on the residency requirement. You know what I'm saying? So thank you. And the fact that Buffalo could have potentially been Atlanta, you know what I'm saying? That may be worth checking out. You know what I'm saying? So is there another caller? Okay, good. So you know what? One of the things I want to do is thank you for sharing that information about who's supporting who, right? Because one of these other issues I want to talk about, because obviously one of the major supporters for India is the Buffalo Teachers Federation.
Mm-hmm. They gave $1,000.
And I would call that a major support. You know what I'm saying? But they clearly is that they're giving it back into the union, right? So the question is where she stands at, where the mayor stands at. But you sent an article out that was in the New York Times this week that I think is important, right? Yeah. And I want to know where they stand on it, right? Because there's some you said earlier, Emmanuel, that there needs to be involvement of the mayor, of the common council, of other elected officials, and maybe it was on other show you said that, but either way it go, they need to be involved in what's going on in education. Right now, they don't have a role in education. But in the city of Boston, why don't you share what you shared this article you shared this about what happened in Boston this week as it relates to their elite public school?
Okay, so Boston, in that sense, and I'll break it down, Boston basically has 3 city honors, guys. It's a bigger city. It has these 3 schools that are centuries old. As a matter of fact, the oldest one, several presidents have actually attended them, and these are their city honors. What they did was have the boldness, the courage to go ahead and vote their board to discontinue the methods and means by which they had been populating those. Now, similar to our city honors, they had a disproportionate number of whites and Asians attending their elite school.
Boston Latin School is called.
And what they did was they said, listen, there's a certain group that seems to be disproportionately able to take advantage of this, and what this means ultimately, this education means is a path to a higher socioeconomic and life-changing experience for these kids. We want to get these numbers such that the masses of Boston are able to experience this with disregard to their ethnicity or socioeconomic status. So what they did was they took a look at what Chicago was doing, and they ultimately voted and implemented a 8-tier system based on socioeconomics that allows, or should by design, pull in more minority students, black and brown students, that are going to be able to participate in this elite public education in hopes of raising all boats by a rising tide, as opposed to just special, or particular groups that have benefited.
Yeah, and I think we need to get the mayor and India Walton's position on this, because obviously we've been fighting for this for years here in Buffalo. We got an OCR ruling that says that our school systems discriminate against minorities at our elite public schools. We got a book that was written by one of the top experts in the country, Dr. Gary Orfield, talk about discrimination in elite public schools, the Buffalo investigation. And here's an opportunity, for us to be able to say that here's a model, whether the Chicago model, the Boston model, because under Dr. Cash's leadership, we won that ruling, and under Dr. Cash's leadership and this current Board of Education's leadership, we saw the number of minority students at our elite schools go down. You know what I'm saying? Even after the OCR ruled that they was discriminating, they changed the system, and the system got worse. And so what we need more voices. We need the mayor, because in Boston, the public school, the mayor appoints the board of the superintendent, not the board of education. They have a school council that's appointed by the mayor, but ultimately the mayor appoints the superintendent.
Interestingly enough, if you read the article, they're in the middle of a mayor's race.
Yeah.
Right.
They're in the middle of a mayor's race. So again, we talk about this all the time. When every sector is involved in education, we hold people accountable differently. So now you're in the middle of this mayor's race, and I think 2 of the candidates went to the Latin school, I believe.
Yep, that's right.
And so now, again, we have this buy-in where everybody, people running for councilman, people running for mayor, are all focused and lasered in on what's happening in this education system in Boston. And that's all we're asking for here. We need everybody involved.
And I want to say this. Boston is an interesting parallel to Buffalo in some respects.
That's right.
Boston is a heavily segregated city.
That's right.
Yeah.
When you look at the top segregated cities, you see Boston, you see Buffalo, right? So it has that in common. But the other thing is, expect big pushback. They didn't just arrive here overnight and everybody was like, yeah, that's a pretty good idea, let's do this. There was a lot of pushback, and expect lawsuits. They are going to end up probably in both state and federal court because there's a certain status quo that does not want to lose what they consider to be a leg up with regard to access to these elite schools. In order to accomplish this in Buffalo, there is going to be a lot of friction because you are going to have to blow up some established norms. Does not mean it's not worth doing. Also, the question is, they've set up a system. We have to look at how that system works over time. We're going to want to look at these numbers in a year. We're going to look at these numbers in 2 years to see whether it's actually successful, assuming it gets to move forward.
Well, we know the system we chose in Buffalo don't work, for
Right.
sure. You know what I'm saying? So we can't keep doing what we know don't work. You know what I'm saying? It's better to at least try something different to get a different result. And we've seen that in Buffalo. With the OCR ruling, we assumed that Buffalo was going to go in another direction. And because of the pushback that came from an organized effort from those people who benefit from the status quo, we've seen the perpetuation of the status quo. People the people who are benefit continue to benefit. The people who are losing out continue to lose out. But we got to keep fighting. Because Boston like you said, Boston, they fought this for years, and they finally had a breakthrough, and a lot of it they contribute to what's happening.
Yeah, and I know we're coming up on time. I'll just end with this. What Joe just said is so important because, again, friction isn't bad, right? In a democracy, in a space where everybody's opinion should be valued, friction is a good thing. We want these opinions. We want these feelings. We want everything to come to the table, and we want to walk away from it doing what's best for everyone. And that means sacrificing some of the things you feel importantly about. And so that's all we've been talking about today. Whereas this mayor's race you're going to hear a lot of things over the next couple of months. And that's okay. It's okay for the mayors to disagree. It's okay. It's okay for the mayor in India to disagree. It's okay for both sides to disagree because that's democracy. But what we're asking you to do is to not pick sides just because you one yelling and one not. Listen to the issues, critically think them, analyze them, and make the best decision as it relates to you. We want a more educated electorate, and this is going to be a very interesting case to look back from a year from now. The voter turnout, how people voted, and all that. So just do that.
And so let me wrap with this. My prayer is that literally we have a record turnout of Buffalo. That we have a record turnout, not just because it's this race, but that we have a record turnout similar to what we had in November, because every November we should have a record turnout. Every November we should have more and more people vote. And so what we're hoping is that you kind of get the message that we can use this platform to talk to you, not about who to vote for, to talk to you about the importance of voting, and having your voice heard, so that we don't have 20% of our people, or in some cases 10% of our people, deciding what 100% of our people have to experience. You know what I'm saying? So that's the opportunity we have before us. I want to say, anything else I want to say before we close?
Just with these articles, and I know we reference them every week, I think we're going to try and post those so you guys can actually go and read this stuff. So you don't have to take our word for it. Do a deeper dive into it and take a look at it and learn and help us learn.
Yeah, and I want to say a special condolences to Brother Otis Barker, who's lost his son. His funeral is at 11 o'clock right now here. I think it's at St. John's. So for those who want to support Brother Otis Barker, and I also want to say for those people who are interested in supporting the Youth Entrepreneur Marketplace, the CAO Youth Entrepreneur Marketplace is going to right now 11 o'clock to 2 o'clock over at Push Buffalo.
429 Plymouth.
429 Plymouth at Push Buffalo. So young people, we looking for you to sow into these lives of these young people, invest in these young people who have businesses. And so with that, we leave every week, and we encourage you to support us by saying, power to the parents.